Australia's location is important for the world's exports, and its international trade is also important. Since Australia has a large territory with vast, uninhabited areas, all towns are scattered around. This leads to huge expenses for transportation when using trains and ferries. The government also have to pay large amounts for its telecommunications to build up the catching between these regions. The Australian people are mainly living in 5 cities: Melbourne, Sydney, Perth and Brisbane and Adelaide. The most special one is Perth, which is one of the most isolated cities in the world. However, this does not affect its state to be one of the largest cities in Australia. Most large companies, like the 2 leading companies, Telstra and Qantas, they are both based in Perth.
In our survey, over 100 CEOs who had recently been through an acquisition or merger were asked which areas of their activities needed the most effort. As you can see, the most frequent response to this question was that information technology requires the most effort. According to 58% of those we surveyed, IT was the most time-consuming and needed the most work. This is understandable as many of the IT issues are extremely complex and the consequences of any change in IT can have a significant impact. The key is how quickly and effectively IT integration can be achieved, and there has to be a clear understanding of the consequences there may be of not getting it right. The 2 other areas requiring significant attention, sales, marketing and business development on the one hand, and financial management on the other, both were selected by 49% of the respondents.
All my research in that I conducted was my 60+ graduate students, was motivated by their need to learn, so that we can teach. Of course, in some inventions happened along the way, but I've always considered the end result. And I always consider that this invention to be byproducts of the learning process. The end product for me was always better understanding, or when one really succeeded in unifying theory that can help us in teaching the subject. I've also looked at teaching as a vehicle to try new ideas, or new ways to doing things on an intelligent group of learners. That is, as the vehicle for the teaching research results. And in my experience, this kind of teaching is the most stimulated and motivating to students. I am also uncovered many interesting research problems is the cause of teaching the subject. It is this unity of research and teaching, their close connection and the benefits gathered by exercising and the interplay that to be recognized the successful professor.
Here are 3 important factors in creativity: people, process, and product. The most important one is the process. First, you have to create the right person through education with a creative mind. Second, you have to create the right process to have people engaged in innovation process. Third, you need to find the right problem to work on. Human beings can survive and prosper largely depending on the creativity they have. If you identify and assess the creativity of a finished product, it is taken as a proxy for the creativity of the person who produced such a product. Therefore, a creative product should be surprising, original, beautiful, and useful. People should have factors necessary for genius, ability, and right mindset.
The historic town of Mostar, spanning a deep valley of the Neretva River, developed in the 15th and 16th centuries as an Ottoman frontier town and during the Austro-Hungarian period in the 19th and 20th centuries. Mostar has long been known for its old Turkish houses and old bridge, Stari Most, after which it is named. In the 1990s conflict, however, most of the historic town and the old bridge, designed by the renowned architect Sinan, was destroyed. The old bridge was recently rebuilt and many of the edifices in the old town have been restored or rebuilt with the contribution of an international scientific committee established by UNESCO. The old bridge area, with its pre-Ottoman, Eastern Ottoman, Mediterranean and Western European architectural features, is an outstanding example of a multicultural urban settlement. The reconstructed Old Bridge and Old City of Mostar is a symbol of reconciliation, international cooperation, and of the coexistence of diverse cultural, ethnic, and religious communities.
How often does a civilization occur? By studying that, we could look at stars that are suitable for the development of civilizations. How many new stars appear every year? 7, but some stars are too cold and some are too hot. Only about 20% can be considered as suitable. We all know that there are some factors for species and animals to survive and reproduce, including environmental conditions, temperature, tolerance range, body size, weight, diets, seasonal and daily activity, behavior, and the altitude they live. Animals migrate to find a new habitat because the change of environment, and only species that have the tolerance for new environment could survive and reproduce. Human beings are the only organism that makes extensive use of technology to extend the limits of its natural tolerance range.
He says innovation equals invention. Let me just stop here. Innovation equals invention. Often people mistake these two things for the same thing. Innovation equals invention. They are not. Innovation is something that generates value for the world. It makes something faster, better, cheaper. It gives someone some great satisfaction. An invention is an idea, a technology, a patent. In and of itself, it does not generate value. So these two are not the same thing, and sometimes you see them interchange. And that's not correct. So innovation equals invention times commercialization. So and when we look at this equation of innovation, something of value, it requires a new idea, and then it requires someone or some organization that is going to commercialize that idea and to make it of value to the world.
Aquaculture, the farming of fish, shrimp, shellfish and seaweeds, has been the sources of human protein for nearly 4,000 years, especially in Asia. In the last decade, however, there has been unprecedented growth in aquaculture production, more than 300% since 1984, which has increased the importance of the modern food supply. It's the world's fastest growing food production activity. And globally, more than 25% of the odd fishing and shellfish production in 1999 was attributable to aquaculture. Yes, this industry's contributions to human diet is actually greater than the numbers imply, whereas 1/3 of the conventional fish catch is used to make fish meal and fish oil. Virtually all farmed fish are used as human food. Today, nearly 1/3 of fish consumed by human is the product of aquaculture, and that percentage will only increase as aquaculture expands the world's conventional fish catch for the oceans and lakes continues to decline because of overfishing and environmental damage. The comics I show you with lots of people chatting around in a room is a form of description. We use different kinds of methods to describe a situation. Sometimes we have to use visual description, particularly when we do not witness the scenario. I was born during the Second World War and my hometown is X. For example, when I asked my mother about the war, I always ask her, "You have mentioned this," or that when you talk to me when asked her about the shelter, I asked her what the shelter looks like and when did you go to the shelter. From her response I could get more visual evidence as I can to write my book.
But what we are going to discuss today is how the Port of London was discovered and what we discovered about it. Now, if you look at the historical records of Roman London, there is only about 14 actual references to London in antiquity, contemporary references. And all those, only one is in the 1st century. There are none at all in the 2nd or 3rd century. There is only one in the late 3rd century and there is 4 in the 4th century. So if you are a historian trying to write the history of Rome in London, it's very difficult. You don't really have much data. You're going to depend on the archaeological evidence, the material evidence of the port and indeed the town to have any understanding of what happened then. And so, what we're looking at here is how did we discover about the Port of London? There is no historical documentations, no customs books, no terrorists, no idea of the taxes. We have to understand the port entirely from the archaeological evidence. So that's what we are going to do today. So, if we move on to the next slide. I love live streaming. Thank you very much.
Audio Jungle.